Hello there. Thanks for being patient. We had some technical difficulties getting started today. My name is Julie Hirschberg. I am the owner, founder of Re+active Therapy and Wellness here in the Los Angeles area, and joining you live as I do every Friday to chat about what we're learning, what we're doing here at Re+active. And it has certainly been a week, maybe a month for me personally, but I think for a lot of us, I think the start of 2022 has been kind of crazy. A lot of it is pandemic related. I think if you're in Los Angeles or other parts of the world that are hit hard by this, and you're a parent, you're really feeling it because every week there's people exposed, you're testing, you're preoccupied with symptoms. Heck, we even had a little trip to the ER at our house last night. So it is a crazy time. And regardless of whether it's the pandemic or something else, times can be really stressful. And that stress wears us down. I can certainly feel it myself. And I know many other people can as well. And one of the first places that I will really turn to in stress are practices that help me in my nervous system response, that sympathetic response that occurs when we are stressed and panicked over things, and help to turn it and bring my nervous system, calm my nervous system down into a more parasympathetic state. These autonomic practices have been a big part of my life personally ever since I incorporated yoga, mindfulness-based stress reduction, even psychotherapy into my own life for over the past 15 plus years, almost 20 years. And these have been major game changers for me through autoimmune disease, through major life and work stresses, through family deaths, through this pandemic. And I'm just sharing that personally for you. But one of the things that I've begun to really appreciate is how much they've helped me as a therapist, and how much I can bring these practices that are truly evidence-based into my own life, for my own self as a therapist, and for my clients. And so that was the theme for this week. I just thought, with so much stress going on, I had to share some of my favorite autonomic practices and resources that help us as healthcare providers and help our clients. So if you missed it on Wednesday, I went live on our Instagram page with who I call our Autonomic Jedi. This is Naoya Ogura. He's our clinic director in West LA and also an OT, and has really just a gift at autonomic toning practices. So he shared a lot of these in our lives. So again, if you're not already on our newsletter, you should join it. We send out all of our videos and resources, and I'll send that out this Friday, and Monday you can join at reactiveeducation.com, or you can join at reactivept.com if you're a person with a neurologic disorder. So he shared some of the practical pieces of that on Wednesday, and today I wanted to share a little bit of the research on autonomic practices and two big pieces of literature. Before I dive in, I do want to mention, we mentioned this on Wednesday, Naoya has put together recordings that we have for the very first time put together as a download for people. They are a breathing practice, a grounding practice, and a guided imagery practice. These are things that Naoya uses a lot. You can download those at our reactiveeducation.com webpage and then use them. You can use them yourself for yourself as a healthcare provider, but also for your clients. I have really loved using these. So one little disclaimer before we jump into the research too, is when you think about these autonomic practices, the grounding practices, some of the mindfulness, if you yourself, or you're with a client who is really confronting very profound dysregulation in their nervous system, it may be that they need not just a recorded practice, but maybe a one-on-one. I know I've worked really closely with a therapist who's trained in linking some of that emotional experience to body experience. This can really help in it being a place of safety to perform some of these mindfulness practices. So if you've tried a mindfulness or an autonomic practice before and found it actually did the opposite for you, you might be that type of person that needs a more tailored and individualized approach. And I would highly recommend working one-on-one with somebody to individualize it for you. Okay, so let's talk about the first article that I wanted to share, which is really for healthcare providers. And this was a systematic review. I'll put the link in our newsletter. It's called Mindfulness-Based Interventions to Reduce Burnout in Primary Healthcare Professionals, a systematic review and a meta-analysis. It came out just last year, looking at the wealth of literature in some of these autonomic practices. And in the intro to this paper, I really love how they described it. So I'm going to share a couple of things from the article. It said, mindfulness refers to a process of paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. I find myself struggling with the non-judgmental part, but it's a key part. It's part of my practice to practice not judging myself, I think. And the goal of a lot of these mindfulness or autonomic practice is to cultivate these into daily life. And that can occur in things like mindful meditations, into yoga, the grounding, all of these different ways. And incorporating those into daily life, especially for healthcare providers, can naturally increase our ability to cope with adverse emotional events and give us some balance, emotional balance and well-being and self-awareness that we can bring into clinical practice to reduce some of our stress and our burnout. And when you look at the research overall, and they looked at quite a few studies, you could see that these mindfulness-based types of interventions do significantly reduce things like emotional exhaustion or depersonalization and increase the sense of personal accomplishment, particularly for healthcare providers. And they improve the healthcare provider-patient relationship, and that can then improve their outcomes for a person. So this is why this topic is so important to me, is something that is really helpful to us as healthcare providers, and it is a way that we can help our patients. And what they found, first of all, is there is a lot of literature, but there's more to be done. There's some limitations. There's some biases within the literature. In the systematic review, they did find that these mindfulness-based interventions do decrease some of those major domains of burnout for a healthcare provider, like emotional exhaustion, and they improve personal accomplishment. That is great. However, we need more. We need more research in this area. And I think this is a growing area, again, particularly because of the pandemic. So that was one of the first things. I also wanted to connect the dots for you is, how do we know that some of these practices that maybe have traditionally been called mindfulness or grounding, how do we know this is an autonomic practice that can help us with our autonomic nervous system regulation? And so there's studies on this, of course, right? And to look at mechanisms here. And so one of those studies is called Central and Autonomic Nervous System Interaction, is altered with short-term meditation. And so in this one, they measured it via heart rate variability. And we talk about heart rate variability a lot here as a direct autonomic measure. And they found a direct influence of the mindfulness practice on heart rate variability. So that is one piece of the pie. They also found EEG changes. So looking specifically at the brain activity, that indicated that there was more autonomic control as well. So, and that was actually a randomized controlled trial, comparing it to a control group. So that was pretty promising. So a couple of studies there that show autonomic changes in our nervous system with these mindfulness type practices. Now, one of my favorite mindfulness practices is a grounding exercise, also an autonomic type exercise. And I've talked about this before. Grounding techniques kind of fall under this type of mindfulness that develop some interoception. So how our brain monitors and updates the body on the overall physical state, and the ability to recognize body sensations and be aware of our emotional states. All of those are part of a grounding exercise. And one particular type of grounding exercise that I really love, it's part of the mindfulness-based fitness training. I've talked about this before. Elizabeth Stanley has researched this quite a bit in the military, and it draws on mindfulness and body-based skilled training skills for that autonomic regulation and applying it in day-to-day practice. Now, it's an 8-week program that they do, kind of like the mindfulness-based stress reduction, another huge research program. That's a program that I did when I was first really looking into this and doing this myself. So, oh, sorry. Just had technical difficulties there. I think the live is running a little funny today. So anyway, she's done a lot of research, and there's one piece that was called Mindfulness-Based Training Attenuates the Insula Response. So insula is our fear center in the brain to an aversive interoceptive challenge. This was in the journal Social, Cognitive, and Affective Neuroscience in 2016. They looked at a group of Marines who underwent this type of training and compared them to controls. And they found these brain changes, specifically attenuation of the right anterior insula during an experience of loaded breathing. So they actually tested them with a tough situation and saw that they had more control during kind of a negative experience. And that was really promising to me. So that particular study, again, was looking at Marines who undergo a lot of stresses every day, right? So in summary, I talked about the autonomic practices in healthcare providers and some of the literature there. We talked about how we know that some of these mindfulness practices truly do change our autonomic nervous system. And then in that last study by Dr. Stanley, we actually see both, that this improves somebody's ability and it changes their autonomic nervous system at the same time. So a lot of great research there to support this use for ourselves and with the people that we work with. So again, if you are not part of our newsletter, go to reactiveeducation.com. You can sign up. If you're a person with a neurologic disorder, I recommend signing up on reactivept.com, because we'll send out the newsletter directly to you, and we'll send those out this weekend for you. So you'll get them soon with all of these great resources, and you can grab the recordings, the breathing techniques, the grounding, the guided imagery. You can grab all of those from our very own Naoya. So thanks so much for joining me today, and I will see you next week.